grey ponytails with a grey beard.
Yeah, right.
So we're excavating the site of a Roman villa, which you can see really nicely behind us. There are big white walls, you can see the length of it going this way and the width of it that way. Big stone Roman villa walls with column bases, but it's what's underneath that's also really interesting. So we're removing the villa to see what's underneath, and underneath we're finding traces of an Iron Age settlement. So there are things like pits where they would have disposed of their rubbish, ring gullies that mark the footprints of roundhouses or enclosures, and inside of those we're finding things like Iron Age pottery, as well as tools like bone needles that would have been used for weaving or sewing and producing textiles and things that they would have used during the Iron Age. So I think so far probably the most interesting artefact that we found is the bone needle that was found deep in an Iron Age pit. It's really interesting because it's got a point at either end, so it's not just a single-ended needle, it's a double-pointed needle, and the hole is actually in the middle, which shows that it was probably quite a specialised tool for producing a particular type of textile and a specialised technique that we might not necessarily be using today. You did very well, Hannah. Very proud of you.
We said we're doing it. She was like, no, you do it. Quietly back out. More jewels.
Apparently that's me. Don't do anything wrong. But, yeah, we could. I was thinking maybe me with yourself or someone.
Dig it out.
Digging together.
I'm gonna go
have a little chat after digging, like that. I'll let you guide where and what. So what are the different patches?
So the Roman villa that we can see behind us, what we're looking for is what's underneath it, and we can see that it has been built on top of an earlier Iron Age settlement. So we're finding not only the remains of the Iron Age settlement that went before it, but also the villa itself. And we know that these types of villas, not usually just one building alone, they would have been part of a courtyard with other ancillary buildings as well. What we've uncovered so far is just part of this aisled villa, and it's likely that somewhere in this landscape there are other related buildings to do with the Roman villa. I mean, the building that we have here is about 30 metres long, 15 metres wide, and that's just the main building. It would have sat within a courtyard area, and then there would have been other buildings as well, so perhaps granaries, places where they would have stored different types of tools, maybe even things like shrines and bathhouses were often part of farming villa complexes, and we also have things like the Roman corn dryers, where they would have dried the harvest to store it for longer periods of time as well. Potentially there is a lot more to discover, so we hope to come back and continue investigating over the next few years.
Right. So most of these pits and post holes that you can see here are Iron Age. Early to late, there is a mixture at the moment we found. However, this long ditch that goes through there is early Romano-British. So we found some very nice black burnish ware pottery. There's quite a bit of activity here actually, and we now are uncovering what looks like a V-shaped ditch, which is very much of a Roman type. We haven't found any other V-shaped ditches actually in the rest of the site, to the best of my knowledge. So that's a really exciting find, even though we haven't really got much out of it. Artifactual evidence, a few little bits of pottery, but the fact the shape is there, and it's going for some distance, is a very substantial ditch. So that's quite exciting actually. It could well be a sort of more of a boundary ditch. It's quite substantial, so it wouldn't necessarily be around an individual dwelling. It's more like to be surrounding a smaller settlement, or at least denoting the area. For example, if we have the villa there, the villa's had a lot of farmland around them, so it might denote the edge of a, like a farm field, or just that whole estate, if you like. We're never going to find out the true nature of it, but it's nice to know it's there. But yes, we have quite a mix of periods here. So it's, unfortunately, while we have a lot of post holes, we have yet to work out whether they belong to each other. we need to look at the GIS when this goes into its post excavation phase. People who get paid more than me will sit and look at all the relationships between the post holes, the pits, and just see if there's some correlation there. I mean, we can see there are buildings here, but we can't find definitive one building, if you like, which is annoying. But this happens, which does show there's a lot happening in this area over a few hundred years. So within them, you can never really tell whether they're contemporary with one another. You can get an idea. Obviously, if they're very kind to leave just a nice row of post holes, we can tell immediately. But sadly, here there isn't anything definitive, at least not what we've seen anyway. So it's just almost ridiculous just how much has happened in this small area over, space of about 400-500 years.
What sort of
The villa here, I mean, we're calling it sort of almost like a proto villa. It's they start as basic farmsteads and slowly get more and more prestigious. So this has grown. The villa's grown and grown. They would have been farming. We found metalworking, evidence of metalworking, and I mean quite high status things. So this whole area has been important for probably the thick end of 1,000 years, really. Which is quite surprising when you look at it now. It's effectively in the middle of nowhere, and all the major towns and villages are sort of miles the other way. I think, this was quite a substantial area at the time. So.